Hello again and welcome to another Mordy and Glory Warhammer 40k video. Today's episode is a tournament after action report. That's right, it's time for some more dispatches from the front lines. And oh boy, do I have a spicy meatball for you guys, because I did not pick my list for this tournament. No, my community picked my list. I was at the mercy of the internet. And so this is not the story of Pure Infantry Guard or anything like that. This is the story of the Imperial Guard Autocannon Offensive Fighting Force, also known as the Jackoff. And so without further ado, let's mount up, roll out, and drive right into today's episode. Tell me, do you know what makes a good soldier?
The ability to fire 3 rounds a minute in any weather, sir.
No, you fool! It's the ability to click on the affiliate link down in the description and buy yourself a copy of Sharpe's Command.
I command here.
No, I command here.
No.
Sharpe Command is the brand new novel in the best-selling historical series that has sold over 20 million copies worldwide.
God save Ireland!
Buying yourself a copy of Sharpe's Command and supporting the channel at the same time? Now that's soldiering. As is tradition, I want to start off with a few thank yous. Firstly, I want to say a big thank you to the community, because this video wouldn't be happening without them. They fully embraced the vibe that we were going for with the community built list, and they didn't just make a total meme army, they actually came up with a really interesting concept, and it was a ton of fun to play. I also want to say a big thank you, of course, to Just Play Games, the venue and organizer for the event. Just Play is the quintessential friendly local gaming store. They have a decent amount of tables, they sell all sorts of products, and they've got loads and loads of events for various different war games. Just Play honestly is my go-to local hobby shop now, and whenever I go there, I always pick up a little something, and whenever they've got an event on, I always sign up because they're always really, really well run and the staff are super friendly. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a big thank you to all of my opponents. 40k is, at the end of the day, a social game, and in order to enjoy a tournament, you do really need to have some good opponents, and every single one of mine were absolute gents. 3 really, really fun games were had at this tournament, and that was all down to my opponents. But with all of that said, now let's get into the video proper, and we'll start off with the list overview. As per usual, I have recorded a separate video deep diving the army list, and you can find a link to that video down in the description below. But let me give you a quick rundown of the theme and the units themselves. So this list is the Imperial Guard Autocannon Offensive Fighting Force, also known as the Jackoff. This is something that my community has been wanting me to take to a tournament for a while now, and whenever we've done any sort of polls to indicate what the community wants, this one has consistently come sort of second or third place, but after about a year, it has finally won the poll, and the community went an extra step further, and we built the list together. Now, this was such a fun process that I actually want to do this kind of thing again for other lists that I go to tournaments with in the future. So if you want to help influence the kind of list that I do take to tournaments, make sure to join some of my live streams, because that's where we decided what list I was going to take and also what units were going to be in the army. Now, the idea behind the Jackoff is that I take all of the autocannons that I have. Now, what I'm worried you heard there was I took a lot of autocannons, but the idea was I took all of the autocannons that I have. Ron Swanson quotes to one side, it was as many autocannons as I could physically cram into a 2,000 point army with the models that I have in my collection. And basically the idea is to see if we can overwhelm people with just lots and lots of strength 9, damage 3. But one of the big things, one of the big challenges that chat had to overcome when they were building this list was not just taking a lot of autocannons, but also making those autocannons actually effective. Because one of the big issues with an army list like this is AP -1 in a world of cover, cover, and more cover. And you know what? They did it. Chat actually did it. They built a very cohesive list with multiple overlapping tactics and combos that actually culminated in a frankly frightening amount of firepower, an insane amount of Daka that even the Orks might consider enough. But what was actually in this list? Well, we had 2 platoon command squads, each with an autocannon team, a master vox and a grenade launcher, and the platoon commander had a planter pistol and power fist. One of these platoon command squads just sat on the back home objective, just putting out orders with a 24-inch range thanks to the Master Vox. The other squad went inside one of the Chimeras and it was putting out some orders to units nearby. I then had for my last character a tank commander with Grand Strategist, and of course we had an Exterminator autocannon, and we had 2 plasma cannons and a las cannon as well. As for the infantry, I was a little lighter in this army than I normally am. I had 10 Katachan jungle fighters who went inside a Orks, and then I had 3 infantry squads with autocannons and grenade launchers, and they went inside Chimeras. This means that I had 4 Chimeras and a Orks for 5 mounted units in total, including the platoon command squad, and every single one of those vehicles had an auto cannon. Either it's being fired out the back with the infantry squad or the platoon command squad with the Chimera and the firing deck, or it was just on that Orks. Little side note, this was the first time that I had used the Theory Craft Katachans and a Orks combo, and it actually turned out to be pretty useful and pretty fun. Definitely something that I would consider putting in future lists. Now, the idea behind this mechanized infantry is that I would be able to dominate on the primary game, but we also need to do some secondaries, and for that we had a single squad of 5 Tempested Scions. Again, a little bit lighter than I would normally take myself, but chat did at least give me something that I could do secondaries with. But then we get to the main part of the show, and that is the vehicles, the other data sheets. Firstly, we had 3 armored sentinels with hunter killer missiles and autocannon. Then we had 3 scout sentinels with hunter killer missile and autocannons. And then we had a Hydra, 2 Lehman Russ exterminators with the same loadout as the tank commander. And then we had 2 Hellhounds. Now, Hellhounds themselves don't have autocannons, but they were an integral part of this list because they allowed me to remove cover from a couple of enemy units a turn, and that meant that between the Hellhounds, Exterminators, and Fields of Fire, I could really boost all of the AP of these autocannons, really just get around the #1 issue. And I can tell you now that I did not feel like I was suffering with the autocannons AP-1 at all during this tournament. So in total, I had 2 platoon command squads, a tank commander, a squad of Katachans, 3 squads of infantry, 1 squad of Scions, 3 armored sentinels, 3 scout sentinels, 2 Hellhounds, a Hydra, 2 exterminators, 4 Chimeras, and a Orks. Now that just about covers the list, but now we need to look at the tournament itself. What was the lay of the land? What was the format of the event, and how competitive was it? This was a 2,000 point 3 rounds on 1 day classic RTT event. It was using Just Play's own terrain maps, which they've developed in-house, which have a mixture of dense boards and light boards. So sometimes there are going to be maps which favor shooting armies, and sometimes there are going to be maps that favor combat armies. So you have to try and have a list that can do a bit of everything. It was also using WTC style scoring, which means that it's not just about beating your opponent and winning by at least 1 point. There is a points differential, and you have to win your game by at least 5 points in order for it to count as a win and not as a draw. Now, as for the competitiveness of the event, I'm not going to lie, this was very much a small friendly tournament. There was actually another very competitive GT going on at the same weekend that had a lot of the players in the area attending it, and this tournament only had about half a dozen people there. There were some competitive lists there and some competitive players, but most people that turned up were just coming for a nice chill day of Warhammer. Now, I know that some people are going to hear such a small event and just go, psst, psst. It's not even a real tournament then, is it? But you know what's crazy? It was actually one of the best events I've been to, because it wasn't crammed with people just shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow. I think one of the issues that I've noticed with 40k tournaments recently, it's not a big issue, it's more like a minor pet peeve, is that TOs are just obsessed with cramming as many people into the tournament as possible, getting as many tickets sold, and just having as many tables as possible. And whilst that does create bigger events, and bigger events, naturally people instinctively see them as more important, potentially more prestigious. It was actually really nice just having a bit of space between the tables. It was actually really nice just being able to have my models on one side and to have that sort of more personal and more intimate event. For me, whilst there weren't a huge amount of people at this tournament, I felt it was a very, very high quality event, and a huge part of that was not feeling like I was crammed in like sardines. So while some people are going to hear this and just dismiss everything, I do think there's a very valuable lesson here, very valuable takeaway, and potentially a bit of feedback to tournament organizers, which is having big events is something that a lot of people strive for, but there is definitely something to be said about having a high quality event that's a little bit smaller, but just feels a lot better and a lot nicer to attend. But with all of that said, now let's get to the real reason why you guys are all here, and that is the games. So round one, I got paired into Darren and his Orks, and some of you may actually recognize Darren's color scheme, because this is actually not the first time that I have faced him in one of these Torn After Action reports, and it was a great way to start the event because Darren and I always got on really well and we always have a good game. And I thought I was going to be the only one running a bit of a meme list today, but Darren completely blew that out of the water with his custom built double stomper list. Both of these models have been heavily scratch built and converted, and in fact one of the stompers is nicknamed R2D2 because it is a converted R2D2 toy which has been significantly orkified. Now Darren actually has an Instagram page where he shares photos of all the projects that he's working on, and I will make sure that there's a link to that down in the description below. Now, as for the specific units in the list, this was in a Dread Mob detachment. There were 2 mechs, both with Kill Saw and Custom Mega Slugger. There was 1 unit of boys with a knob, and then there were 4 units of Gretchen with 10 grots and a runt herd in each one. We then had double stomper, and each stomper had 3 big shooters, Death Cannon, Mega Chopper, Scorcher, Super Gatler, Super Rockets, and Twin Big Shooter. And then we had 1 unit of Storm Boys, 5 orcs strong. Now the mission pack for round 1 was Burden of Trust with Sweeping Engagement Deployment and Raise the Banners as the mission rule. In terms of deployment, I put my Scions in reserve, and then I ended up deploying a lot of my little stuff first, like my Chimeras and my Command Squad and my Hydra, to see where Darren was going to end up putting his Stompers, because I had a lot more drops than him. Now this meant that overall, on my left flank, I had the Scout Sentinels, a Hellhound, the Taurox, the Hydra, a Chimera, and one of the Demon Russes. In the middle, I had another Chimera, the Armored Sentinels, the Tank Commander, and the other Exterminator, and the Hellhound. And then over on the right-hand flank, I had 2 Chimeras. Now, I deployed in this way because Darren had 1 Stomper on the middle left, and he had the other Stomper on the far right. And my thinking was, if I can overwhelm the left-hand Stomper, then it means that the right-hand Stomper will take a little bit of time to actually make it to my lines, and at that point I'll have a couple of turns to try and bring it down. Now bear in mind that a lot of my anti-tank firepower is going to come from the flat damage 3, but a significant portion of it is going to come from my hunter killer missiles, most of which are going to be fired off into the first stomper. This means when the second stomper comes around, it might take me a little bit longer to chew through it. So that's why I've almost refused that right flank so that stomper doesn't have much to get into, and it should give me a couple of turns to try and gun it down. As for Darren's deployment, like I said, he had one stomper on the middle left, one stomper on the far right, and then behind each of the ruins in his deployment zone, he had some Gretchen, and then inside War2D2, he had 10 boys, and inside the other stomper, he had 5 storm boys. We then roll off to see who is going to get the first turn, and the Imperial Guard managed to seize the initiative. And this was a really big deal because it gives me the chance to unload into those stompers before they even get the opportunity to move. My turn 1 movement is pretty quick. I scout move and then move the scout sentinels up the far left flank so they can draw line of sight to the stomper, and I'm also able to get within 18 inches for daring recon. I then move and scout move the Taurox with the Catachans forward, and that gets onto that left-hand objective. I am able to then move and also move one of the Hellhounds to also get within 18 inches on that left-hand flank, and that's pretty good because it means I can then remove cover from that stomper. And then pretty much everything else just wiggles round and pokes its bum out so that we can see the stomper. Now, there are a couple of units that can't draw line of sight. One of the Chimeras on the far right can't do it, and the Hydra has no line of sight to the stomper, but everything else does. And we pile everything we have into that giant clanking monstrosity, that abomination of a war machine. We start off with the Hellhound, which is able to get a few shots onto the stomper. I don't do any damage to it, but crucially, I am able to remove cover. I then fire the Scout Sentinels into it, and the stomper actually does a really good job of its saves. I don't manage to get any of the hunter killer missiles through, and I think I managed to chip one little bit of autocannon damage through, which is three wounds, so it's not bad at all. I then line up one of the exterminators, and once all of the autocannon and plasmas and las and even stubbers are fired, we have managed to chip off another couple of wounds from the stomper thanks to the plasma cannon. But what this really means is that stomper now does not have the benefit of cover. Everything in my army is rolling 1s against it, and everything in my army has an additional AP as well. And we unload, holy hell, we unload the righteous wrath of the Emperor into this beast, and it is a terrifying amount of firepower. The armored sentinels go in, and they really impress. In fact, I was impressed by the armored sentinels through the entire tournament. They're able, thanks to AP -2 on their guns now, and lethal hit, and 4 rerolls to wound, and rerolling 1s to hit, they're able to get a couple of autocannon wounds through, taking 6 damage off. And then we fire the hunter killers, and I'm able to get 3 hunter killers through. All 3 hit, all 3 wound, and because they're ignoring cover with an extra bit of AP, those hunter killers are now AP -4, so I get all 3 through, and I do 9 damage. So the armored sentinels take 15 wounds off the stomper alone. At that point, the stomper had lost about 21 out of its 30 wounds, and between the tank commander and the final exterminator, we are able to bring the first stomper down. Bring it down, men! Bring it down! And we obliterate it, and it just keels over with the sound of 1,000 trees crashing in a forest, and the first engine is killed. Honestly, I think this was the perfect storm, and it was exactly what this list was designed to do. Pick 1 or 2 targets a turn and just flatten them, drown them in high caliber auto fire. And I'm not going to lie, that first Stomper came down was a huge morale boost for me because I wasn't sure if the theory was going to translate to the tabletop. And it was a bit of a morale blow to the Greenskin Menace. We then go over to the Orc turn 1, and War2D2 comes barreling down the side with a good move and a fantastic max roll on the advanced dice. The Stomper gets onto one of the middle objectives, taking it away from one of the infantry squads that I had snuck on there for one of my secondaries, and also getting on the corner so it can start laying firepower into my tanks. Now, it does have an ability or stratagem where it can advance and shoot, but it can't charge this turn. The Orcs also start moving their grot mobs forward. They send one onto the middle objective to raise the banner over there, and they also send another one onto the right hand objective where War2D2 is to raise the banner there as well. We then have the final unit of grots that aren't sitting on the home objective, ones that are pushing forward, and they go for the left-hand objective because they actually out-OC me on that one. Now, I am thinking about using Overwatch, but I want to save my CP. I'd actually use my CP in the first turn for a reroll on a damage roll. I want to save my CP because I know now that I've spunked most of my Hunter Killers that I'm going to want 2 CP for Fields of Fire against War2D2. As for the Orc firepower, the Stomper goes ham and puts multiple guns into different units, trying to cause as much damage as possible. But I personally think Darren made a little bit of a mistake here. And we did chat about this after the game, and he thinks, yeah, he probably should have done things a bit differently. Because he split his firepower to try and take out as many tanks as possible, but he didn't use, again, it's either stratagem or an ability where he can get full rerolls. I believe it's either to hit or to wound, or maybe even both on his Stomper. Instead, he just sort of pushed the button and just got, it was lethal hits overall. Now, if you're going to push aggressively with a Stomper like that, and if you've been hit hard and you've lost a lot of your firepower, and if your intention is to do as much damage as possible and you're splitting fire, then you absolutely need to go for the big damage, even if it causes lots and lots of hazardous on your unit, which that was the trade-off. The reason he didn't do it is because he didn't want his Stomper to end up doing loads of hazardous rolls to itself. But I think if that Stomper would come around the corner, gone for the hazardous yet full rerolls, it could have picked up 3 or even 4 vehicles, and that meant any damage that it took to itself would have been offset by the damage that it had mitigated by removing a lot of my firepower that's going to come into it. But even without the full rerolls, the Stomper does a really good job. It basically wipes out the infantry squad, leaving just a handful of survivors. It completely annihilates one of my Lehman Russ exterminators, and it does a number of wounds to one of my chimeras as well. So if Darren had actually gone for the full rerolls, I think he probably could have got the Chimera and the Hellhound as well. But unfortunately, he didn't do that. And so the end result is he's taken an Exterminator out and he's damaged 2 other units. But it's important to note that Darren had called the War on this turn. So his Stomper was going to have a 5+ invulnerable save. And he was going to need it as we go over to Imperial Guard turn 2. Now, to start off this second battle round, I brought in my Scions because I'd got behind enemy lines as one of my objectives. And then I had to fall back with the Scout Sentinels, which Darren had tied up in combat with those grots that had snuck that objective away from me. And then I brought the Hellhound round and I brought the Catachans out of the Taurox. And the Hellhound and the Catachans just burned all of the Gretchen to death. It felt a little mean, it felt a little bit like bullying, but if they are going to tie my Sentinels up, then I am going to turn them into, well, Kentucky Fried Gretchen. I probably don't think that would be a good seller, but who knows? It's the 41st millennium, you know, it's between that and Corpse Darts, right? I also moved forward with a couple of Chimeras onto the middle objective. Now, I'm not able to get on that middle objective, but those 2 Chimeras are able to clear away the grot mob that is residing on there. Between the las guns for the las gun arrays and the stubbers and the heavy bolters and everything else, those Gretchen are quickly reduced to a green smear. But then we get to the main event. Firstly, the Hellhound powers forward, it lights up the Stomper, takes a wound off it with a cheeky bit of flame damage, and I then spend 2 command points for Fields of Fire. This is one of my favourite things about Hellhounds, because they have the squadron keyword. If you have enough CP saved up, they can actually single-handedly deliver a double doozy of removing the benefit of cover and putting additional AP downrange as well. I then went with my remaining Exterminator, and I was able to actually get a couple of wounds through, one from the Autocannon and one from the Plasma Cannon, and I was able to do another 5 damage to the Stomper and also an extra AP. Now this means that everything else in my army, the Autocannons from the Hydra, from the Sentinels, from the Tank Commander, from the Chimeras, just everything is now going to be an additional 2 AP with ignoring cover. So that means that my autocannons are now AP -3, and it means things like the plasma cannons are AP -5. It's just wild. Now, a lot of that additional AP doesn't help me that much because of the WAR giving the Stomper a 5+ invulnerable save, but unfortunately, it's just not enough. That 5 invulnerable save is just not enough to save the Stomper. And these Armored Sentinels go in again, and even without Hunter Killers this time, they are able to, with a couple of cheeky lethal hits and then an extra couple of wounds from the rerolls on the autocannons, they're able to actually sneak 3 wounds through on that Stomper and just immediately take 9 wounds off it. So that means, and that's something my Armored Sentinel's done twice in a row now. And then the Tank Commander goes, and it doesn't have lethals, to be fair, but it does have twin linked on its Exterminator autocannon. And the big thing here, guys, is even though I've lost an Exterminator, because this Stomper is so much closer, I'm getting rapid fire range now with the 2 Exterminators. So I lost 4 autocannon shots from last turn in comparison to, you know, the amount of autocannon shots were going into the first Stomper. But I've actually got an additional 8 autocannon shots. So it was almost like I didn't really lose that Exterminator. And so with the Tank Commander doing quite well on the twin linked, that getting a couple of wounds through, it then comes down to the Hydra, and the Hydra does really well. The Hydra managed to get a wound through from the autocannon, and also I think the Hunter Killer missile goes through. And by the time we get to the remaining 2 Chimeras, the Stomper's only got about 4 wounds left. And the first Chimera is able to chip 2 off, and then the second Chimera, and this was the only vehicle that I think that had a Hunter Killer left. It was this and the Hydra had it going into turn 2. But that final Hunter Killer flies out. Eagle 1, Fox 2 flies out, hits the Stomper, gets through the shield, and is able to deliver the perfect remaining damage, bringing the Stomper down. And that is Scratch 2 Flat Top. And with WAR2D2 finally becoming a Force Ghost, the second major engine kill of the game was achieved. And that is 2 Stompers down in 2 turns. And going into turn 2 for the Orks, all they had left was a unit of boys, 2 mechs, and 2 units of Gretchen. Now, Darren actually did play really well, and he did actually manage to get all the way to turn number 5 without being tabled. He had his final unit of Grots on his home objective, and this kind of highlighted one of the big weaknesses of the list. The fact that Darren was able to essentially sort of just hide and move block me with like a unit here and a mech there meant that I didn't actually table him, and he did actually get a very respectable score by the end of the game. Now, with that second Stomper going down, it was a bit of a foregone conclusion, and I won't bore you with the small objective grabs here and there by the Orks, but the final score was 60 points to the Orks and 78 points to the Guard, meaning that it was not a terrible defeat for the Orks in any way, shape or form. And in terms of like WTC points, That actually came out to, I believe, a 13-7. So Darren did a really good job of not only recovering from losing a Stomper early on, but actually husbanding his final resources to the end of the game and getting as many points as possible. And with this being WTC scoring, that's really important. And if this was like a team tournament, that would have been a very, very good score, and one that could have helped contribute to his team's result overall. But as it was a single event, and that was a victory for his Imperial Guard, and a pretty stunning one at that. We had lost a handful of infantry and a couple of armored assets, but apart from that, we had been able to decimate the heavy armor of the Orks, and we were feeling pretty confident going into round 2. So game number 2 was against Ash with his Grey Knights. And like with Dan in the first game, Ash is someone who I've actually played against before and on one of these after action reports. Last time we drew our swords against each other, he was running the Imperial Guard and I was actually running my double Land Raider Death Guard. But oh, how the turntables keep turning. Because this time I was running the Guard and Ash was running the Elite Marine Force. And he had his Grey Knights, and in his list he had a Brotherhood Librarian with the Sigil of Exigence. He had another Brotherhood Librarian, and he had Drago. He also had a giant 10-man squad of Brotherhood Terminators, and then he had a smaller 5-man squad of Terminators as well. There were also 3 5-man strike squads. We then had 3 Nemesis Dread Knights to round the list out, each Dread Knight being equipped with a heavy incinerator, a heavy psi cannon, and a Nemesis Demon Great Hammer. The mission for round 2 was Purge the Foe. That means you get 4 points for killing enemy unit, 4 points for holding objective, 4 points for killing more enemy units, and 4 points for holding more objectives. As for the deployment, it was Tipping Point, and the twist was Smoke and Mirrors. For deployment, I had a Lemurus Exterminator on the left flank with 2 Chimeras and the Scout Sentinels. In the middle, I had the Tank Commander, the Hellhound, and the Armored Sentinels. And then over on the right hand flank, I had the other Exterminator, the Command Squad sat on the home objective, another Chimera, the Hydra, and the Taurox. As for Ash's deployment, he had the big giant blob of Terminators start on the board on the left hand flank. Then he had the 3 Dread Knights in the middle, and then he had a Strike Marine squad on each flank, and he had the 5-man Terminators and the other Strike Marine unit in reserve. We rolled off the first turn, and Ash let out a huge cry of joy when he lost the roll-off, because he is playing Grey Knights. So he wants me to go first, because that means at the end of my turn 1, he can pick stuff up and teleport it down. That is the advantage of going second with Grey Knights, and it's a very, very powerful advantage. So by winning the roll-off, I put myself on the back foot, which is one of those weird quirks of Warhammer, which has always felt a little strange to me. You shouldn't be trying to lose a roll-off. Now, my turn 1, I scout move and move the Taurox so that it is behind the mid-ruin on the right-hand flank, and I start recovering assets with that Taurox because that's one of the secondaries that I've drawn. I also recover assets with the Tank Commander that's in my deployment zone, and I push forward with both units of Sentinels to get them onto the middle objective. I also push forward on the left-hand flank, so I'm holding that objective as well, giving me 3 out of the 5 objectives under my control. Now, my other secondaries were Marked for Death, which I immediately just redrew. I just spent my CP for new orders on that, and then I drew behind enemy lines. This was a bit of a shame because it meant that I had spent a CP to basically get 2 objectives that I couldn't score, but it didn't actually cost me any CP because then I just discarded behind enemy lines at the end of my turn and I gained that CP back. Now, at the end of my turn, Ash had picked up his 5-man Terminator unit. I apologize, that didn't start in reserve. It was just a Strike Marine that started in reserve. And he also picked up the big 10-man unit Terminators, and he picked up one of the Dread Knights. And then at the beginning of his turn, he put the Dread Knight back down exactly where it was, the 10 blob of Terminators down exactly where they were, and he just put his 5-man Terminator unit into the middle of the board using the 3-inch deep strike. And he did this because he had got secure no man's land and he'd also got recover assets. Now, this means that he was able to recover assets with the Strike Marine squad that was just hiding behind the ruin on the right-hand side, and he was able to recover assets with one of the units in his deployment zone, and he was able to secure no man's land because of the 3-inch deep strike. And that was Ash's turn. Didn't really fire anything meaningful, didn't really do any damage. I think he was able to damage one of the Sentinels with his Terminators, and that was about it. But Ash is not going to expose anything here because he is trying to limit the amount of damage that I can do. He wants to limit my purge points, and he's trying to deny me the ability to score more on the hold more objectives, and he's basically waiting for an end game situation where he can jump out and in turn 5 kill one, kill more, and then hold one, hold more, and get a huge swing on the points. Now it comes over to my turn 2, and the first thing that I do is move one of my Sentinel units forward, and this allows Ash to use Mists of Deimos. It's one of his stratagems, and he just teleports those guys away. And you might be thinking, oh well, shouldn't Ash have told me he was going to do that? Ash did tell me he was going to do that. We had a very open game, very gentlemanly game. And the thing was that either he moves away with Mists of Deimos, or he uses the Sigil of Exigence and he gets to instantly redeploy. So either I force him back into Deep Strike, or I let him basically redeploy on the board. And I thought, well, I don't want him redeploying because that might make his charges easier next turn if he does want to come out at me. But either way, the one target that I have this turn just flitters away into the ether, and I am left at the end of my movement phase with like nothing to shoot. And to be honest, I have quite a passive movement phase. I'm thinking to myself, I just want to sit on these 3 objectives. I want to score more every turn, and I just want to see what secondaries I get. And I'm just going to use my CP to burn through my secondaries as quickly as possible if they're not good ones. And if I draw a second one that's not good, I'll just bin it off, and that will get me my CP back. So no harm, no foul, nothing gained, nothing lost. Now what's interesting is I actually bring it down and call the Horde for my 2 secondaries this turn. And I can actually score both of those because I can obviously bring down one of the Dread Knights, but the 10-man Terminator blob does count for Call the Horde because of its starting strength and the number of wounds that it's got. It actually is technically a Horde unit per that objective. Now, I actually bin Call the Horde off straight away, and I redraw and I get Storm Hostile Objective, which is perfect because by making those Terminators just go away, it meant that I just instantly scored Storm Hostile Objective, and I managed to get myself 4 points for that. But really, that's my turn. I push forward a bit on the left flank, really secure that left-hand objective. I push forward my Sentinels a little bit, really secure that middle objective. And I push forward my Hydra a little bit, just creating an anti-deep strike buffer zone. But the problem that I have is I have no indirect fire in this army. And if I push forward too aggressively, what's going to happen is Ash is just going to jump out and gank a whole bunch of my army. And so we're kind of in this weird standoff. We're kind of in this weird game of cat and mouse. It's a very, very cagey game where most of my army is deployed. Most of my army at this point is maneuvered to where it's basically out in the open with a lot of the Sentinels and the Hydras and stuff. But then a lot of my main firepower is sort of hiding, and it's who's going to blink first. But the problem with this approach, and I think a big, big mistake that I made in this game, is Ash doesn't need to blink at all. Not because he's a skinwalker or a clone or anything like that. Ash doesn't need to blink at all because he went second. So if he just waits it out, he can always have the last laugh and the last punch on that turn 5. And we go over to Grey Knight turn 2, and it's a very similar affair to last time. They score recover assets at the end of turn 1. They then draw Mark for Death and Overwhelming Force. They bin off Mark for Death, and Ash redraws and gets extend battle lines, which he has already scored. He doesn't even need to expose a single unit because he holds his home objective, and he has that one that's just out of no man's land over on the right hand flank as well. So Ash's turn, he literally just does nothing. Any units that he picks up, he just deploys back down exactly where they were, and he just happily scores himself extend battle lines, and he gets 4 points for Purge the Foe as well, just for holding one objective. Because Ash, don't forget, had done a really good job in my turn 2 of denying me the 8 for hold more on Purge with that deep strike that he'd done turn 1 with those Terminators into the middle objective. At this point, Ash and I are having a good laugh with this game because it's pretty ridiculous. No one wants to fight each other. We're not even playing a war game. This is just the cagiest cage match of all time. And whoever goes out first is going to take a bunch of damage. And really, all we're doing at this point is playing like Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh! And we're literally, it's more like we're playing poker. Because it's a case of who draws what secondaries, who draws what cards. And it's going to be, will the river provide? That's it. But we both, I guess it's not a great analogy because we've both got our own rivers. We've not got cars that are going into the middle. But you guys get the point. It's just a case of who draws what secondaries. And whoever draws the better secondaries is going to get an advantage in this game. And right now it's pretty equal on secondaries. Ash had managed to get 8 points in the first turn and then 5 points in the second turn. And I had managed to get 3 points the first turn and 4 points the second turn. So Ash is actually a little bit ahead on that front. And we both had 4 for primary. But then we go into round 3. Round 3, I genuinely hold more objectives. I get the big 8 points on primary. And then for secondaries, I draw Established Locus and Sabotage, which are both objectives that I can easily do. Firstly, I can just establish Locus in the backfield with a unit of Scions, and then I can get Sabotage without really even leaving the comfort of my own home, because my giant ruin that's in the middle of my deployment zone is eligible for Sabotage, because it's the unit that has to be out of your deployment zone, not the terrain piece, which I didn't realize. I thought you had to do it on a terrain piece outside of your deployment zone, but no, it's a terrain piece and the unit doing the action has to be outside of your deployment zone. So I have a Hellhound that just chills behind that ruin because of the funny deployment zones that we've done, because it's like the L-shaped Pariah Nexus one. I just sabotage that ruin, and Ash is like, yep, there's no point in even seeing if you're going to score that one. You're definitely going to score it because I'm not going to get over there and get anywhere near the Hellhound. So I get Sabotage and I get Established Locus, and I actually have a really good turn on the points because I end up scoring 15 in my turn 3. However, I had made a bit of a mistake. And it's up to you guys whether you think this was a mistake or not, but Ash and I discussed it after the game, and I think it was a big mistake that potentially cost me a lot of points. What I should have done with my Scions in my turn 3 is to deep struck them somewhere safe. And I should have just done Established Locus in the middle of the board. Now, yes, that would have only got me 2 points rather than 4 points, but it would have meant that Ash wouldn't have been able to get kill 1, kill more in his turn 3, because he just picks those Scions up, no problem whatsoever, and that gets him 8 points. So I'd got myself 4 points, but I'd essentially given 8 points away. Now, Ash and I had a bit of a discussion about this, like, well, surely you were going to come out and maybe do some damage to me anyway, try and get that kill. But Ash was like, well, maybe I would have done that. Maybe it was a decision, but if I do that, there's a chance that you get the kill, and then it's not, there's no kill 1, kill more, it's just we both kill 1. So he was like, actually, there's a chance I probably wouldn't have done that. So I, instead of getting 4 points, I essentially caused a 4-point swing over to my opponent. And this was compounded by the fact that Ash was able to do that without exposing any units, and he then got containment for one of his secondaries, which he did very easily. Once again, those strike marines just behind that ruin on the right hand side, they're getting him all the points. I don't have any artillery, so I can't just flatten them. This is where I was just crying out for a pair of basilisks, and so they get containment over there, and then he takes the 5-man Terminator unit, which had Mist of Deimos away early on, and he 3-inch deep strikes them into my deployment zone. And that not only gets him his second containment, but it also gets behind enemy lines. And the worst bit is, even though those Terminators are exposed, and even though I could see them with like all of my firepower, these are the Terminators which have the sigil of exigence. So I can't move near them and I can't shoot near them because they will just teleport away. And this little 5-man Terminators is doing a really, really good job of getting Ash loads of points. And so despite the fact that I got 15 points in my turn 3, Ash gets a whopping 21 points in his turn 3. And it's at this stage where he is now starting to clearly lead. That's a round 4 for the Imperial Guard, and this time I am sat on more objectives, so that means I do get the 8 on primary. Once again, the kill eludes me, and because if I go after those Terminators, they just teleport away. I don't actually move around them, and I do shoot them, and I shoot them with the Hellhound first, because I think, well, maybe Ash might just let me do the Hellhound and then teleport away to see what else I shoot at them. But no, straight away, the moment I target them, they teleport away, they redeploy, and they redeploy to somewhere safe, just into Ash's back lines. And so I haven't been able to get them, so I can't get the kill. And for my secondaries, though, I do manage to get engage on all fronts, and I also get cleanse. And I'm able to score both of those max, no problem, because I am in a commanding position in the middle of the board. So I do get maximum points on my secondaries, and that does get me another 60 points. So I'm scoring well. I'm scoring well. The problem is that I'm not scoring well enough. We go over to the penultimate turn for the Grey Knights, and they do slow down a little bit on the scoring front. They get Storm Hostile Objective and Cleanse. Now, neither of those are particularly easy to do because I am firmly sat on the middle objectives. They do get Cleanse for those Strike Marines that are behind that ruin on the right-hand side, so they do get 2 points for that. But the big thing is that they are actually able to kill one, and they're able to kill more. And the reason that they're able to get those kills is because in my turn 4, to try and make sure that I was guaranteed to get good points for the primary for holding more in my turn 5, I had basically powered forward with everything, and I had dumped a bunch of infantry out onto objectives because I wanted to have the maximum objective control possible. Because the problem is that a lot of the Terminators and the Strike Marines are actually really OC intensive. Unfortunately, by doing that, it did give Ash an easy target for kill one and kill more, which he is able to do in his turn 4 by basically just picking up one infantry squad on an objective with some bolt of fire from one of his Terminator units. Now, turn 5 does come around, and I do manage to hold on to both objectives in the middle and my home objective, so I do get the 8 for hold 1, hold more, which I pretty much got every single turn that I can get it apart from turn 2. And I draw 2 really good secondaries for my turn 5. I get engaged on all fronts. So that was last turn. I get secure no man's land and extend battle lines. So I get another 18 points this turn. So I end the game on 70 points in total. And what's kind of interesting is Ash has had a couple of slow secondaries pop up. And so we go into turn 5 for the Grey Knights. And it actually comes down to what secondaries Ash draws if he wants to win the game. Because he will get hold 1, and there is a chance that he will get hold more, but not guaranteed chance, but there's a chance he'll get hold more. And he should get kill 1 and kill more. Now, if he gets those primary points, then in order for him to win the game, he actually needs to get 2 secondaries, which between them, he can score 5 points on. Now, bear in mind, a lot of the easy 5-pointers like Extend Battle Lines was done, and Secure No Man's Land was done. He had thrown away things like Overwhelming Force earlier as well, and he also had not achieved Storm Hostile Objective. So there were actually, despite the fact that he had been doing a very good job of playing it cagey the entire game. It actually was a dangerous risk of coming down to being a 10-10 WTC score for Ash. He just needed one secondary that he could score 5 points on. And so naturally, turn 5 against my mechanized army, he draws Bring It Down. Turn 5, with no risk to themselves, the Grey Knights power forward, and they are able to destroy both Sentinel squadrons and the Orks, and I think they get the Hydra as well. And in total, they score 16 points on Bring It Down, and they are able to end the game. He also drew no prisoners, so it's like the perfect, literally the 2 secondaries that Ash needs for this turn 5 gambit that he's been playing for. Just, I'm going to go out and smash everything. He draws the 2 perfect ones. No prisoners, Bring It Down, and he ends up from those secondaries actually his final score being 94 to 70. But what's interesting is he actually got from those 2 secondaries, he got about, I think he maxed out slightly. So he ended up getting from those 2 secondaries what he needed to win the game. But if he hadn't drawn Bring It Down and no prisoners, it was very likely that the game was going to end in a draw because of me being able to sit on more objectives pretty much the whole game. But that is the way the cookie crumbles. That is the way that the game goes sometimes. And Ash was able to draw the secondaries that he needed. And we were both using the same phone, the same app, using my phone, my app, for drawing secondaries together and all that kind of good stuff. So it was very much above board. Before anyone goes, oh, he drew the secondaries he just needed. Nah, it was my phone, it was my app, it was my machine spirit that was randomly drawing them using Tabletop Battles app. And Ash just happened to get the luck of the draw, the heart of the cards, and the river did provide. And he was able to get 94 points to my 70, giving him a decent win. Now, there are a number of lessons learned that can be drawn from this game. Some of them are game related, and some of them are real life related. So the first thing to mention is this was the one matchup that I didn't want to happen. An army that could score really, really well and didn't need to come out to play and had really good combat potential. When chat was building this list and we were going through units, one of the things that I pointed out, and they were like, look, it's fine, sometimes you've got to roll with what you've got, Mordian. One of the things I pointed out was not having indirect fire could cost me a game. And this is a great example. This is a really, really good case study of how just a couple of basilisks could have turned this entire franchise around. If I'd had 2 basilisks, I could have deleted that strike marine squad on the right hand flank that kept scoring those points. I could have done all sorts of things to harass the Grey Knights, and I could have put pressure on them so that they were forced to come out and play. And then we get into a shooting match, and that's probably one that I win. So there was a serious flaw in my list, and that flaw was exposed. On top of that, I think I played this game really badly. I think Ash completely outplayed me. Ash is a really good player. He's actually going to the WTC for Team Wales, and he's won many events in the past. And Ash is someone who I rarely actually ever managed to beat. I only beat him in that one game at the Double Death Guard, and he completely outplayed me in this game. And I think the reason I played this game so badly is I was way too passive. I sort of just moved on to the middle of the objectives, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll just do the objectives, I'll score my points. No. That was always going to be a fool's errand with the fact that Ash had gone second. Now, if I had gone second, that was absolutely the right play, because I sit out there, I score more than Ash, and Ash knows that if he wants to score or keep up with my score, he needs to come out and start killing. And if he starts killing, then it gives me the opportunity to get kills as well on Purge. But I went first and I played it far too passively. And this leads into 2 other lessons learned. I played it too passively because I was like, oh, well, I don't want to move forward and lose units. Why does that matter? Yes, it's Purge. Yes, there's kill 1 and kill more and all that kind of stuff. But by playing it very passively, I didn't put any pressure on my opponent. My opponent basically was able to just dictate the flow of the game. Would playing aggressively have changed much in this game? Maybe not. Maybe the advantage was always going to be with Ashes. Maybe it's just a bad matchup. But by not playing aggressively, by not pushing forward and overwhelming with my huge amount of armor, he's got very little anti-tank. It's like 3 red dice. Everything else is just struggling to kill like servitors, sentinels and stuff. So by playing it passively, I didn't leverage my greatest advantage, which was an overwhelming number of tanks. And it's one of those things where it's like, I've been playing a lot of Old World recently, and in Old World, you can't just throw your units away because you win or lose games based on how much of your army is left over and how much of your opponent's army you've been able to destroy. But in 40k, you can lose 95% of your forces and still win the game. This kind of felt like I'd taken a step backwards and I'd forgotten that I could lose so much of my army and basically have no repercussions for doing so. So I should have played it more aggressively. But there are two very real reasons why I was playing this game so passively and so badly. And honestly, it comes down to I didn't have enough sleep. Sounds crazy, right? But I have talked about this a lot. One of the most important things you need to do when going to a tournament is get a good night's sleep. And unfortunately, I did not get a good night's sleep. Despite the fact that I did daytime streams, so I would have had time to get plenty of sleep, I ended up staying up, and that was because I had to rebase a bunch of sentinels, and I had to paint a couple of extra turrets for this list, and paint a few extra weapon systems and a few other bits and bobs. So I didn't get a good night's sleep at all. And so game one, I'd been able to sort of power through that lack of sleep. But game two, it really caught with me. And I just felt like I was half awake the entire time. Compound that with the fact that I very foolishly ate a big lunch. Now, you should always eat when you're at a tournament. But if you eat too much, you go into a food coma, right? You get very lethargic. And so I was on very low sleep. And I just had a big lunch, which basically meant that I was playing this game half asleep. I just threw this game away through real life factors. And I know some people might think I'm making up excuses there. Not at all. I said Ash outplayed me, 100%. This is what I want. The reason I'm saying this is I want to use it as an example of how real life will impact your game performance. How you have to be careful with what you're eating at all. You should always eat something, but don't overeat. And you should always have a big sleep the night before. If I had got both of those things right, I wouldn't have been passive. And maybe I would have been able to play this game a lot better. So lessons learned there, kids. And the good news is that going into game number 3, I had identified what I'd got wrong in game number 2, and I wasn't going to make the same mistakes again. Game number 3 was going to be all gas, no brakes. I was going to launch a proper armored assault, a proper blitzkrieg, because game number 3, I ended up playing into the Sisters of Battle. Now, my opponent in round 3 was other Tim. That's right, there were 2 Tims, there are dozens of us, and it was a Tim-off. So the I jack off was in a Tim off, and there can only be one. There can only be one. Now, other Tim was using Sister Battle, and he was using Bringers of the Flame. He had a Canoness with Fire and Fury, and a Dialogus with the Manual of Saint Griselda. There was also Junith Erutia on her big pulpit, and we had Morven Val, and we had the Triumph of Saint Catherine. There was a big 10-man unit of Battle Sisters, and then there was an Immolator and a Rhino, 10 Arco-Flagellant, a Castigator, an Exorcist, and a big unit of Paragon Warsuits, 3 of those with Morven Val, and then we had 2 separate painted engines, and we had a Retributor squad, and a Seraphim squad, and a Vindicare Assassin. Now, that might sound like a lot, but the thing is that all of these units are quite small. It's like a little bit of everything in this list. And when you actually add it up, it's like 30 infantry and 7 or so armored units. And I'm including the Paragons in there and the separate penitent engines. And when you compare that to the fact that I had 55 infantry and 13 units, armored units, then that means that I actually outnumbered the Sisters 2-1 in both boots on the ground and metal boxes. And that level of overwhelming armored superiority and firepower was something that I was going to leverage to the max in this game. Now, speaking of the game, round 3 was supply drop combined with search and destroy deployment, and the mission rule was adapt or die. For deployment, I went into 2 distinct armored wedges. On the left-hand flank, I had an exterminator, 2 chimeras, a hellhound, and the scout sentinels. On my home objective, I had the command squad, and over on the right hand side and also the middle, I had all of my other armor. I had my armor sentinels, my hellhound, my exterminator, my tank commander, and then I had my 2 chimeras, my hydra, and the only thing really going down the right hand flank was the scout Orks. As for the Sisters of Battle, they had Junith and a sister squad and an exorcist over on the left-hand flank. They infiltrated the Vindicare really far up. They put that on the far left flank so they could actually see my objective from the get-go, and my opponent was hoping to essentially snipe one of my officers out and get rid of one of my orders for my sentinels. And then over on the right-hand side, my opponent put everything else. He had his Paragons, Morvenval, Seraphim, the Castigator, the Triumph, the Rhino, the Immolator. So basically had a little force on the left-hand flank trying to delay my armored push down there, and his main thrust was going to be down onto the bottom right-hand objective. Now that actually ended up being a very, very good call by my opponent, because in terms of the Alpha and Omega objective, the objective that was going to disappear at the start of turn 4 was the one on the far left, and the objective that was going to disappear turn 5 was the one in the middle. So my opponent had set up a huge amount of his forces on the gamble that the right-hand objective was going to be the big one worth 15 points at the end of the game, and that gamble had paid off. So we roll off for first turn, and I get it again. Skinwalker Mordian was out in force, because that means I have got the hat trick. I have gone first in all 3 games, even when I didn't want to. However, in this game, I was totally okay with going first because I wanted to launch that lightning fast assault and put pressure on my opponent from the beginning. I wanted to learn from my mistakes and remove the stain of the shame from game number 2, where I had been a feckless and incapable commander. So first thing I do is I scout move with the scout sentinels forward, and then I move with them and they get onto the objective on the left hand side. I follow up with the chimera and the hellhound, and they both get in range of the assassin who's perched on top of the large L-shaped in the far left corner, and the hellhound just gets like 7 shots, 6 wounds on the assassin, and my opponent just fails his saves. Doesn't quite get the saves he needs, and the assassin's just killed straight away, which is good. And then in the middle, I just push forward this giant armored spearhead with the armor sentinels at the front, just daring the sisters to get into a firefight with me. And the funny thing is, like, if the sisters come out and start like doing damage to me and charging me and tie me up, I'll just stay in combat and shoot my way out and run them over, because they've not got 2-up saves and they're not that durable. And even if they get into combat with things like my exterminators and with my chimeras, I could just overwhelm them with the amount of firepower. I'm just going to drive up to you and I'm just going to shoot my way through. I'm getting through there one way or another. Over on the right hand side, I scout move and then move my Orks onto the objective in the far right. And I do this because it allows me to get both Established Locus and Cleanse. You see, I established Locus in the middle with the Armored Sentinels. They'd had moves, they just moved a little bit further so they could do that. And then I cleanse on the right-hand side and I cleanse on the left-hand side, getting me a lot of points. I don't max my points because obviously Established Locus was in the middle, but I get 6 victory points straight off the bat. And that is a good start. And the big thing in this game is I feel switched on. I feel like I'm just got a lot more energy and then I'm raring to go. This game, I am full of piss and vinegar. Over to Sisters turn 1 and they execute their plan. They power everything that they've got on the right hand side down that flank, and they actually end up putting a lot of firepower into my Orks. I do pop smoke on the Orks, And this does manage to keep it alive. And in fact, it even survives a charge from a Penitent Engine, surviving on 1 wound. Now, this is a really big deal because it actually denies my opponent secure no man's land, because he's got like 2 OC from his Penitent Engine and I've got 2 OC from my Orks. Now, my opponent is able to get Sabotage for 3 in the middle. He just boosts one of the Seraphim units over there and just does it in the big L shape that's sort of facing his way in the mid. And I've got nowhere that I can get around that corner and stop him realistically. So he gets 3-point Sabotage there. He does hold on to secure no man's land because he's pretty confident that I'll be able to score it next turn. Going into the guard turn 2, and we are on 2 objectives in the middle, so we do get 10 points for that. We then draw 2 really good secondaries. We get Containment and Extend Battle Lines. Now, Extend Battle Lines I have already achieved, so that's 5 points right in the bank. And I'm able to get Containment in the top left-hand corner because I use one of my Chimeras to do it outside of my deployment zone on the left-hand board edge, and I deep strike my Scions down so I can do it in outside of my deployment zone and do the top table edge. Now, I also push forward aggressively with my Armored Sentinels in the mid, and I spread a lot of my armor out in the mid as well, in case that the enemy does try and tie up lots of it. Because if I can avoid being tied up, that's great, but if I do get tied up, it's not the end of the world. For guard shooting, I was actually able to destroy the Penitent Engine on the bottom right-hand objective, the one that had gone after my Orks, and I also got rid of the Rhino as well. It had come forward maybe a little bit too far, but there was a couple of big lines of sight that I could draw to it from my Exterminator and my Tank Commander, and I had no issue in lighting up with the Hellhound first and then letting rip with those 2 tanks, destroying it and forcing the Arcoflagellants to disembark. And to really rub salt into the wound, I was also able to get the Immolator as well. My Armored Sentinels that had pushed forward could draw a line of sight behind the ruin, see the Immolator quite clearly, and thanks to Take Aim, I was able to get 3 Hunter Killer Missile hits and wounds on that thing, and it wasn't able to make enough for its saves, and between the Hunter Killer Missiles and the Autocannons, I did get rid of the Immolator as well. That was a really, really nice turn for me because I completely demechanized my opponent. And now it is basically a Sisters Infantry Force supported by a single Castigator going after my Armored Spearhead. Turn 2 for the Nuns with guns, and they don't get any primary, but they do manage to draw Engage North Fronts, which they add to Secure No Man's Land, which they kept from turn 1. Now, they are able to achieve both of those secondaries this turn. Firstly, they use the Castigator to destroy the very badly injured Orks, and then they send the Arcoflagellants in and kill the infantry squad that bailed out, getting them that bottom objective and getting them 2 points for secure. And they also get Engaged North Front because not only are they in 2 table quarters with the bottom objective and the one near the home objective, but also on the top left flank, they drive the Exorcist out. Now, I gained a newfound respect for the Exorcist when it got max shots on its missiles, yeeted every single one of them into a Sentinel squadron, and blew it away. They blew away my Scout Sentinels in one fell swoop. There was some good damage done by my opponent, and I did get kind of unlucky with my saves, but the Exorcist, I've been seeing it as like an artillery piece. That thing ain't an artillery piece. That thing should be used as a frontline assault gun, just yeeting missiles at people point blank. So that was a really good blow for my opponent, taking out a Orks, an infantry squad, and a full unit of Sentinels, despite the fact he lost quite a bit of his armored assets. But after a blistering Sisters turn 2, it was time for guard turn 3. And you guys know the saying, when the guard gets hit hard, we hit back even harder. This turn, I got another 10 points on primary, and for my secondaries, I drew Engage North Fronts, and I got Bring It Down as well. Up on the left-hand flank, I moved my Exterminator, my Hellhound, and 2 Chimeras, and my unit of Scions in range of the Exorcist. In the middle, I pushed forward with the Armored Sentinels, and I had the Hellhound and 2 Leman Russes, one being the Tank Commander and a Chimera. And over on the right-hand flank, I am just overwatching, I am just securing with firepower that bottom right objective with my Hydra and also with my other Chimera. Now, when it comes to shooty, I am able to destroy the Exorcist because I go with the Hellhound first, removing its cover, and then I lay into it with the 2 Chimeras and the Exterminator and the Scions, and they are able to destroy it. This actually frees up all of my central firepower and my right-hand side firepower to go after my opponent's Arcoflagellants, as well as going after the Penitent Engine. And the Arcoflagellants are really tanky. They've got like a 4 at Feel No Pain or a 5 at Feel No Pain, something insane. But just through so much damage 3 shots, I was able to overwhelm my opponent's Arcoflagellants, and one by one they were brought down by autocannon fire, plasma cannon fire, and hydra fire as well. And I had just enough firepower left over to pick up the Penitent Engine as well. I believe it's the Armor Sentinels that were able to get that. Armor Sentinels have been kicking ass. In every game they've been able to fire stuff, they've been kicking ass, and they really impressed me. In that first game, they did loads of damage to the Stompers, and in this game, they've been able to pick up an Immolator, and they've also been able to pick up like Penitent Engine. They've just been reliably just taking down armored assets, and it's been really, really good to see. So my opponent going into their turn 3 is in a bit of a pickle, because he's now got Junith and her sister squad, another sister squad. I think he's sort of split the 10-man squad into 2 5-man squads. He's got the Retributors, the Seraphim, and the Paragons, and the Castigator, and the Triumph. But all of that is basically facing down my army minus a Taurox, an infantry squad, and a Sentinel. So he has to go for a really big hit this turn if he wants to try and correct the equation, balance the equation, and give him a chance to fight through turn 4, turn 5. And fair play to my opponent, that is exactly what he goes for. Every single Sisters unit comes out to play and ready to Barney. Now, unfortunately, my opponent hasn't managed to get any primary on turn 3 again, because I shot him off that objective on the bottom right. But he does draw Established Locus and Overwhelming Force. Now, he establishes Locus in the center using his Seraphim, and then for his damage, he actually is able to destroy the Chimera, which is on the middle objective, and the infantry squad from that piles out as well. And he's also able to destroy 2 out of the 3 Armored Sentinels. And he does some significant damage to some of my other vehicles. But the problem is that he spreads his firepower out a little bit too much. And a big issue that he's got is all of the tanks and vehicles that he can see outside of that Chimera are like a 2-up save. So the Scout Sentinels are 2-up save, the Hellhounds are 2-up save, even Russers are a 2-up save. And it kind of made me realize that Guard has the potential to spam an ungodly and unholy amount of 2+ saves. And even when your opponent's got like Melter, if you're able to like get cover, if you're able to pop smoke, I haven't really used much CP, so if you've got like -1 damage as well, it can make it very difficult for your opponent to get through that almost pseudo Custodes like amount of 2+ armor saves. And what's worse for my opponent is that he's now fully exposed in front of a Guard gunline. He's gone in there, he's tried to do a big hit. It's not really paid off. Lost like a Chimera and basically a Sentinel squadron. My Exterminators are still going, my Hellhounds are still going. And so when it comes back over to my turn 4, I just annihilate him. I pick up so much. And once the autocannon fire has died down, and once the flames from the Hellhound have stopped crackling, all my opponent has left is basically a Castigator, the Triumph, and a badly mauled Paragon Warsuit unit with Morven Val. Retributors, Sisters, Junith, Dialogus, any infantry that my opponent had were just picked up and removed. And so, unfortunately, turn 4 and turn 5 were a little bit of just an exercise in my opponent getting what points they could. Now, what's interesting is my opponent did actually end up scoring pretty well. He does manage to get 8 points turn 4 for his primary, which is good. And he gets the big 15 at the end because he basically just stockpiles everything he has onto that bottom objective and just manages to cling onto it by the skin of his teeth for turn 5. So that does get him some good points. And he's also able to get extend battle lines and bring it down on some other good secondaries. So once everything is settled, once the final score is in, and bear in mind, I don't get the big 15 in my turn 5, the end score is 78 points to the guard, and it is 60 points to the sister battle. And what they've got left at the end of the game is they've got the triumph, and they've a triumph on 1 wound and like a castigator on 1 wound. But both of those units were enough for turn 5, my opponent, to not only get cleanse, but to also get some containment as well, getting him some cheeky end game points. So it was a victory for the Imperial Guard, but a very, very well played game by my opponent. He had a plan, it almost went off, and unfortunately, he just didn't quite get that turn 3 big hit that he'd been building up to, that he'd been staging for, and that I think is what cost him the game. If that big hit had gone in, it could have really made a difference. Main lessons learned from this game is I should have done this a game earlier. Frankly, that's it. If I had been this aggressive earlier in the day in game 2, then there's a chance that I would have been able to win it. You could see the overwhelming armor here. You could see that my opponent was like killing vehicles and there was always more. You see my opponent was killing infantry, there was always more. I do feel like this was a great case study of what could have happened every single game if I just been a little bit more switched on. But hey, better late than never. And so it just goes to show that if you've got an overwhelming advantage in armor and you don't think your opponent's really got enough anti-tank to deal with that, then you need to press home that advantage. Just go all in, full Blitzkrieg style. And so at the end of the day, we'd played 3 games of 40k and I'd managed to come away, I'll stop rhyming now, come away with 2 victories and 1 defeat. And many lessons learned. The I Jack Off was a meme list that actually ended up being a bit of a dream list. Getting those overlapping buffs was really fun, really interesting, and ended up being really powerful. If I was to have one criticism of the army list, it felt like I had to set up a lot more stuff for things to go off. Whereas I could have just taken units which had a lot of inbuilt base AP. The big difference between like Exterminators and Vanquishers, for example, is Exterminators can deliver a withering hail of firepower, but they need help from other sources of AP and ignoring cover and stuff like that. Whereas a Vanquisher cannon just goes, yeah, I might only do 1 shot, and yeah, that shot might miss, but I've got all the AP that I need right here. I don't need any help. But it was fun taking an army that actually required you to set up step 1, step 2, step 3, and then to see it all coming together was very satisfying, even if there were more steps involved. And because it was only a small event, with my 2 wins and 1 loss, I was able to sneak onto the podium and I came 3rd, claiming the bronze medal and a little bit of bonus store credit, which is always a good thing to have. Now, what was really fun and interesting for me about this event was that I was running a community built list, and that added a whole extra layer of enjoyment. Well, at least that's what I think, but let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Did you enjoy this style of army, and what other crazy community ideas do you have? I am working my way towards like the 18 Sentinel army, but if you've got any crazy ideas, get them down in the comment section and I'll see if I can take them to a tournament. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to smash that like button. It really does boost the video and help with the YouTube algorithm. And if you like this style of tournament report and you want to see more content like this, then subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian Glory Hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and Patreons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.